Great pleasure to welcome to the stage Yang Berhormat Wan Yobi Yin, Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change Malaysia, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Wan Zulkifli Wan Arifin, President and Group Chief Executive Officer, Petronas, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Insinyur Ahmad Fauzi bin Hassan, Chairman of the Energy Commission Malaysia, and Yang Berbahagia Dato' Fazlur Rahman Zainuddin, Chief Strategy and Regulatory Officer, Tenaga Nasional Berhad. We will now begin the session. Mr. Boka,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so as was said earlier, there will be an opportunity to do a question, to pose a question on the panel in about 40 minutes or so. So if you have questions, just follow the instruction that were given earlier. But I would start with one of the dimensions of the energy triangle with you, Tanri Wanzul, on the energy security side. You know, energy security is a very important element, and demand is expected to grow. I think in the country here is between 1.5% and 2% year on year. So the element of energy security is very important. There is a replacement of the current asset, an evolution of the current asset, there is demand growth, etc. So how you're looking from the Petronas perspective and the broader perspective, you have, of course, a view on the global market because of your operations across the world. But so how you're thinking about the future energy security in Malaysia specifically?
Thank you, Roberto. I think first, I thought you addressed the first question to the minister first, so that I could have time to. I think like, as you mentioned, I think this energy triangle or energy trilemma, we always talk about security, about affordability, and also about the environmental sustainability. But for Malaysia, I think in terms of security, I think first, today, a lot of our fuels are on depleting reserves. These are depleting reserves. It's oil and gas, this won't last forever, this is depleting reserves. So I think for me, what's important to address purely security, because there are other things that we can talk about, but purely security, I think it's necessary for Malaysia to have a long-term, robust energy policy. I think this would involve a lot from the government and getting everybody together to have a robust long-term policy. It doesn't mean that we cannot tweak the policy as we go along, but I think we ought to have something that everybody agrees today, but we may change 5-10 years down the road. But I think that's one. Secondly, since we are dealing with depleting reserves, it's important that we have an ecosystem that investments will continue to come in. So the ecosystem, the investment ecosystem, I think is the second piece. For Petronas, in fact, we shared this before coming in here. If we look from day one, and I just got this figure actually because I asked my team to look for it. From day one, in the E&P space, from day one, we have actually invested around $560 billion US.
Big numbers.
These are, I mean, from day one, but these are really huge numbers. And essentially, a lot of this comes from the motivation that we need to supply. You need to have a security of supply for the energy for the country. So just to give you, I worry going forward if we don't have continued investment to ensure the security of supply. I think there will be problems in the long term. So I think the second piece for me would be the investment ecosystem. For investors, we are the same when we invest in foreign countries, certainty in terms of regulation, certainty in terms of the tax, certainty and how you deal with authorities. Those are some of the things that we have to pay attention to. And the last one, which you mentioned, I think, is also on the consumer side, on the efficiency. I think there are with Energy Commission and yourself, there are efforts, on this efficiency. I think if we take Japan, for instance, I think we can learn a lot on the efficiency front and what they have done, consumer as a whole, to really manage security of supply but I think for Japan it was more intense after Fukushima. So the security of supply was affected, and but they really orchestrated their efforts very well. So if you ask me about security of supply, I think those would be some of the things that I broadly think about.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think, well, I'll come to you, Minister. I think I'd like to tackle another part of the triangle, the one that is the weakest at global level, and also here is the element of environmental sustainability. And I think this element of efficiency is certainly a link between the two. But what is your perspective in terms of the energy transition and environmental sustainability for Malaysia?
I think as I became an energy minister about a year ago. So we looked into the energy landscape and found out that there are not enough sustainable energy planning or the energy mix in the future. That is why we set a new target of increasing our renewable energy in electricity generation mix from 2% to 20% by 2025, excluding large hydro above 100 megawatt. That is an ambitious target. So we need to compared to the business as usual, we need to inject 3.9 gigawatt more installed capacity, install 3.9 gigawatt renewable energy more in the next 7 years. That is a real challenge, but actually in our energy planning, we have a committee that sits every 6 months to formalize our energy planning every 6 months. But in between that, we will have energy planning in terms of how do we have this 3.9 gigawatt injected by 2025 and being commercialized by 2025. There are a couple of policies that we have actually already announced, just to recap. First is that we have actually enhanced a net energy metering policies, of which people who actually generate electricity on their rooftop can now sell to TNB at the price of one-on-one. We used to have a price that is much lower than what you buy is much more expensive than what you sell. Now it's on a one-on-one basis, net energy metering. We even have revamped the whole website just to make sure that people actually understand how it works, the net energy metering works. And coupled with net energy metering, we also have this supply agreement of renewable energy where when people do not have enough of capex, they can also still lift their rooftop or space so that other investors can come in and put on solar, and that they will share the savings together with whether it's monthly installment or through solar bills. All of these are available at www.seda.gov.my. I don't have much time to actually go into detail of what are the things that are available. Everyone, you can look through the whole website, everything about the new policies are available there. That is on renewable energy. I also want to touch on the 3 incentives that government are giving to green companies. The first one is GITA, Green Investment Tax Allowances. Together with net energy metering and in GITA, Green Investment Tax Allowance, actually companies are able to have a return of investment by putting of their installation of solar panels at about 4 to 7 years, depending on the rooftop structure. That is why we really encourage our SMEs to actually look into these new policies that are given by, that are started by the government. And now we are in the process of increasing awareness amongst industry and commercial buildings that the availability of such incentives by the government. And the second one is GITE, is Green Investment Tax Exemption, where actually green services, green companies in Malaysia actually get tax incentives from the government for your income. The third one, of course, that we have just recently have this started GTFS 2.0, Green Technology Financing Scheme 2.0, where it is a 2 billion ringgit worth of loan, of which we give 2% subsidies, interest subsidies to players, to green players, 2% and 60% guarantee, loan guarantee for 2 billion ringgit worth of loan for the next 2 years. So this is also available online, www.seda.gov.my, or you can go to MGTC website to have a look on, to understand government policies in terms of sustainability of driving more renewable energy players in in Malaysia. And of course, tomorrow we are going to table a cabinet paper where we will further have more options for people who would like to purchase renewable energy in Malaysia. But I am not at the liberty to share a lot more. Hopefully we will get it passed, and then we will share a lot more on the green agenda, how it can be achieved through the reform of electricity industry in green energy trading. I would like to also touch on that when we talk about sustainability, we are also talking about energy efficiency. We are not only really talking about just renewable energy, but energy efficiency. We have, in the process of drafting Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, and really it's the last stage already. I was supposed to see the last draft next week, right? No, next week, and then we will be able to then table to a town hall for more engagement through the minister's office, and then hopefully we'll be able to table it as soon as next year, beginning of next year. And this is on Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, because according to UNDP has done a study with our economic planning unit where if we actually work on our energy efficiency, there is a potential saving of about 46 billion ringgit on energy savings from 2016 to 2030. This is 46 billion of savings if we actually work on our energy efficiency. But of course, we are actually lag behind. We are now in 2019. One of the weaknesses from this study is that there is no regulation. That is why from this study we come out that we must have a regulatory framework of energy efficiency. That is why there is this, the beginning of this Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. We also in the interim have Energy Efficiency Action Plan. And this action plan is to target of an 8% reduction in 8% of energy savings in the whole of actions that we do. So there are actually a wide range of things. I cannot be saying it in just 5 minutes of introduction, but a lot of it are actually available online and available in many literatures. We hope that the policymakers here, some of the stakeholders here can actually look into, just Google it up, you will find a lot of information available. Yeah.
That's very interesting, and certainly welcome action both on the renewable side and the efficiency side. I guess I'll come back later. I want to do a tour, but it will be interesting to see also what is your perspective on the long term, and what are the, I was just seeing some of the questions already starting coming up, is what's your view on the Paris Agreement collectively, you know, are we on track or not, and what do we need as a longer term plan, while short-term action as much needed. But before coming back to that, I will look to you, Commissioner, to give your perspective on the regulatory landscape. Right? One of the challenges that we face in a dramatic or fundamental transition like this one is that policy and regulatory have to keep up with the momentum of the technology evolution that can be very fast. So what is the current energy the regulatory landscape, and how you think will evolve or can evolve to support this energy transition?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to continue with YB Minister's comments on going towards green energy trading, I think what the Energy Commission is preparing now is to ensure that this can be regulated and enable accordingly, so that we have our transition agenda into the next 20-year period successful. And essentially what she mentioned just now includes net energy metering and solar leasing and maybe peer-to-peer energy trading. All these new products or services that are going to be available to the consumers at the grid edge, at the edge of the grid. I think this is happening in line with what the global development is taking place, going towards the edge of the grid. Yeah? And sometimes people getting off the grid. So how do we manage this through a regulatory framework that is transparent, flexible, adaptable, and fair to all the players and consumers? So I think I do not have a clear structure at this moment in terms of what the Energy Commission is going to have into the future in order to address these challenges effectively. But what we are doing now is basically we are looking at what other parts of the world are doing to manage these issues in the developed countries as well as in emerging economies like us, and what is working, what is not working, and what is working we will adopt and adapt accordingly through our process of going through the government endorsement as well as through the process of stakeholder engagement. I think that is very important because unless and until everybody in the economy is comfortable with the new modus operandi in terms of how the regulatory framework works, we will not get things happening. So I think just to highlight that at the moment we have the approach of command and control. Basically, our law and regulations are more prescriptive based design, meaning that you don't have much flexibility on trying to accommodate the new technologies, the new way of the new business models, that is quite rigid at the moment. So what we intend to do, at least personally, I feel that we should move towards more performance-based, more market-based regulatory framework that enables all these latest technologies and services to be carried out efficiently and effectively in the economy. And in trying to achieve that, what we will have to do is basically to not so much of prescribe things through regulations, but prescribe or rather specify things through codes of practice, through guidelines, through directives. And I think this is what is happening in the developed economies. I think that's how we're going to go into the future. Thank you.
That is very interesting. I think there are a couple of elements here that are quite fundamental. I like what you said, to adopt and adapt, right? Because there are a lot of experience around the world. There are a lot of trial, etc. And of course, every country is different. But we can learn from others and adapt. So adopt and adapt, I think, is a good thing. And also, you said a very important element is the framework has to evolve from being very prescriptive to be more flexible. So this is a journey in itself. So well, good luck with that. But it's certainly a fantastic opportunity to experiment there. Let's come to one other element of the energy transition, that is, we have seen the trends are talking about electrification. Electrification, or increase in electrification, is a trend in all economies. Mr. Fazlur, you come from the champion here, from Tenaga, as we call it abroad, or TMB, as we call it here. What's your perspective? How do you see the future of electricity, or the evolution of the electrification, impacting the energy transition in Malaysia, of course?
Thank you very much, Roberto. Firstly, just some caveats. I'm here on a platform, on a forum with my minister and my regulators. So I have to be very careful with what I say, not to contradict them. But anyway, I think in all seriousness, of course, electrification, we believe in electrification. Of course we do, as we're Tenaga. So basically, I think when we talk about electrification, I think before I go into some of the elements of that, I just want to talk about the energy landscape overall and how the trends that we've actually seen. So from our research that we've looked at is that if you look at the energy transition, consumption growth over the past, historically, from 1950 to 2000, the growth of energy consumption has been about 2.9%, as the developed countries, Western world, actually started to develop the economies and continue to increase consumption. So that 2.9% over the last 50 years of the 20th century. In the first 15 years of the 21st century, growth has been about 1.9% in terms of total energy consumption growth, and that's been driven by the shift of the economy towards Asia, whereby China is actually driving that growth in particular. Now, the next question is that what is that growth going to be for the next few years? Yeah, we are in that period, and certainly in terms of the energy growth, we would expect that it's going to be quite significant going forward, particularly because you see population growing at about 1.1% projected over the next decades or so. We're talking about increasing affluence, particularly in the developing markets, increasing use of technology, etc. So the use of energy becomes quite significant over the next few years, and we expect that to be so. Now, the question now is that what's this going to do for the global economy and the planet, etc. So certainly, the challenge is to think about how we can do more for less. Yeah? In a sense that we need to meet these demands, but we need to meet that demand in a more efficient manner. So to me, I think we believe that electrification is actually one of the big catalysts to drive that efficiencies in terms of energy use towards meeting the demands. Yeah? So we believe that electrification is a big area. Now, if I were to look at the areas of energy use in general economies, there are three broad sectors: transportation, buildings, and industry. Yeah? If I look at how each sectors are using energy today, well, if I look at transportation, about 42% of total energy in the country, for example, Malaysia, about 42% is actually in the transportation sector. Buildings is probably about 14%, and the industry about 44%. So if I look at those different sectors, clearly transportation and industry is actually a big area of energy consumers. Yeah? So if we start to look at the opportunities within each of those sectors, and you look at the rate of electrification in each of those sectors and compare that with, let's say, some developed nations, we can see that in terms of the transportation, there's a huge opportunity for electrification. Today, our transportation sector in Malaysia is less than 1%. Yeah, electrification. So there's a huge upside in terms of certain amount of electrification. If I look at the industrial sector, there's about electrification rate about 13%, compared to, let's say, in the OECD countries, about 35% electrification, which means that almost an opportunity of 3 times electrification in industry. However, for building, in Malaysia, I think building, as compared to, let's say, OECD countries, I think we are quite high in terms of electrification rate, about 80%, whereas in OECD countries, about 30 to 40%. So I think that's primarily because we use a lot more air conditioning rather than in the northern hemisphere. There's a lot more gas for heating, etc. So it's actually a slightly different dynamic. So opportunities really that we see is actually in the transportation and the industrial sector. And the way we see it is that given that this opportunity exists, the transition or the conversion of the technologies, the equipment, etc., from what is a traditional technology to electric-based technology. Take, for example, electric vehicles, from the internal combustion engines to electric motors. We've seen that basically for the electric motors, the conversion of energy into power at the wheels is about 60%. So the ratio is about 60% of the energy is energy consumed is translated to power at the wheels, whereas the internal combustion engine is only about 20%. So quite clearly, in terms of the efficiency of electric-based solutions for some of these sectors, actually drives that efficiency in terms of energy consumption. So we believe that going forward, that there's a need to actually consider electrification as a solution to our energy challenges that we are facing, in order to actually ensure that over a period of time, instead of using more, we use less to meet our demands. And I think that as we do this transition, we believe that it creates a catalyst for the economy to actually, to transition, particularly for Malaysia, to transition into a higher technology, higher skilled and higher value kind of economy as opposed to actually maintaining it where it is today.
Yeah.
So these are some of our thoughts.
Thank you. I'll come back to you and also to Tanusri on how you see the evolution of your company. I know in your case you have new units to look at solar and other opportunities. So I'll come back to both of you in terms of how you see the evolution of your own company. We heard earlier the Commission is out there thinking of the framework for regulation, and it would be interesting to see what are the opportunities that you see and the challenges in the evolution. But before that, I'd like to come back to the Minister on this question of, we have seen very clear policy you were telling us, and to go to the website to get more information on those. There are a number of things coming up. That is great, and this will have an impact even in the short term. That is perfect. What is the long-term view on that, and where do you think Malaysia will be in the trajectory to Paris?
In terms of our Paris commitment, Malaysia has committed to reduce our energy intensity. Energy intensity, that means carbon emission intensity, carbon emission per GDP growth by 45% by 2030 relative to 2005 level. We are right now at 33%. Actually, we are at a very comfortable position to meet our Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement, the 45% carbon dioxide intensity, carbon emission intensity, actually 35% is unconditional, 10% is actually conditional upon the international helps and also international capacity building and also financial help. So we are actually very comfortable in terms of meeting our Paris Agreement. The question that we want to ask is that above and beyond Paris Agreement, how can Malaysia leverage on this decarbonization trend to actually help to create jobs? So I think a lot of people has been thinking that, hey, putting on solar panel, renewable energy is just about saving the environment. Let me just put you into perspective. A lot of things that we talk about in terms of renewable energy is that renewable energy is not only just about saving the environment and also meeting the Paris Agreement. I give you a few more things that we can do. Except decarbonization, we are talking about grid parity. Just now you have shown that solar panel actually reduced in price for the past 10 years for 88%. There is a huge drop in price, and also the fossil fuel actually is an upward trend. So there will be time that the solar and the what we call accounting as a levelized cost of electricity will then meet with the fossil fuel in one of these days, and we have calculated and actually not far from the future that we actually will hit the LCOE of solar will reach grid parity with the generation mix that we have now at this moment. That's one. Preparing the future, preparing the generation mix, electricity mix for the future as the coal and fossil fuel price rises. Second is jobs. If you look into the studies today, you will find out that renewable energy generates more job per gigawatt hour of production than fossil fuel. Fossil fuel on natural gas or natural gas or coal, that actually they generate much less job compared to renewable energy, especially on the solar. That is why there is a reason that we are not only really talking about saving the world, but we are talking about creating a new industry, creating a new economic frontier for economic growth in Malaysia. The third thing, of course, I think renewable energy also provides solution in terms of sustainability, but it's on the poverty level. If you look into the rural part of Malaysia, they are very far from national grid. The only way to actually power up and electrify them in terms of our sustainable development goal is to have a microgrid that powered up based on renewable energy. So these are some of the things that people have not seen when we talk about renewable energy. So I really want a perception change in terms of, there are so many policymakers here today. I really want and challenge all of you to really have a mindset shift that putting up and encouraging renewable energy is not only about Paris Agreement. It's about us putting up and setting a new foundation so that there are more jobs can be created to the Malaysians, so that more green jobs can be created for Malaysians. Those are high-paying jobs as well. So we are really I really hope that we are not only leveraging and talking about that how we meet Paris Agreement, but really how Malaysia leverage on this crisis and turn that into opportunity for growth.
Fantastic. And in Malaysia, not only on the installment of the solar, you have already a thriving industry on the solar production. So it's really building on what you have already started. And your point is effectively really the energy triangle. This is bringing solution to the climate, but also to the enabling growth and also the security and access when you talk about remote area, et cetera, et cetera. So technology is enabled that. Thank you very much on that. And what I like to ask now, Tansri, is this element of how your company is a champion of the country globally. It's certainly the most known company in the world. There's been, and the investment you were talking earlier are very, very significant in terms of the impact that your company had in the local economy, but also globally. So with this energy transition, how you are evolving? The first question comes to mind is, are you an oil and gas company or a gas and oil company, and how you're thinking about new energies. So can you give us a way, how you're thinking about your next 10 years and how you are seeing yourself evolving as a company?
So I think, excuse me, like many companies, we do scenario planning. We do scenario planning for the next 20, 30 years. So I just wanted to give some data, just to put in context on why, as a basis of what I'm going to say later. Yeah. Today there are 5, and I agree with Dr. Faisal in terms of the more efficient use of energy through electrification. I think I agree with that. But today there are 5 million EVs globally, and from a study of IEA, these 5 million EVs displace 50,000 barrels per day of crude. 50,000 barrels. Our production today, crude globally, it's around about 99 to 100 million barrels per day. So I just want to give some context on where we are today. In our scenario planning, we think there will be a point of inflection. There'll be a point of inflection where probably, I don't remember the year, but maybe around about 2040 beyond, where this electrification and electric mobility will go up. And I think, if my memory serves me right, 17% of the car park by that time will be EVs. Yeah, so 17%. So as a commercial entity today, we are still strong advocates of gas for a reason that nothing in the data that we see shows that gas, fossil fuels for that matter, oil and gas, will be hugely displaced in at least the 20-year horizon. When we look at the global demand, if you add oil, gas, it still accounts for 50% of the primary energy mix. So that is why, as a company, if we talk about short, medium term, we are still bullish about oil and gas, more gas than oil actually, because gas is the cleanest fossil fuel. So we are still bullish about oil and gas, but we are taking positions for the future. So we are taking positions for the future because the thing is, the returns, the financial returns of an investment in a renewable energy is very different from a financial return of a conventional oil and gas. So I think this is the sweet spot that we, as business entities, these are the sweet spot that we've got to consider. For the future, yes, we have got to position ourselves, but today, how much involvement, and that is the debate that we have. But building on capabilities and skill sets and all that, we need to do it now. So I think I've been on record also that I think for Petronas, I do not want to be ahead of the curve. Yeah? So because being ahead of the curve, i.e. investing a lot more in renewables energy, will compromise our financial returns. So we've got to really be in tempo or tango along at the right pace. So I think that's how we see it. But if data shows differently in the next 3 to 5 years, of course we will change and adapt accordingly.
It's interesting how the, when we talk about electrification of vehicle, etc., there is this experience that we have seen in a case from Norway, where they electrify very quickly. You probably know that there is a high intensity of electrification, and then what they figure out is that, yes, they were reducing emission because their electricity is produced by hydro at 99%, but they didn't reduce traffic congestion and so on. So what they're going through now is really rethinking the mobility, not just as a one-to-one substitution from combustion engine to electric vehicle, but really how, with the new technology, we can rethink mobility at large. So I'm sure that the scenario are updated every year, and to look at this dimension, what's happening out there, and so on. But it's very interesting, your point of capabilities, we have to start building them now, because it's going to happen, and we'll need those elements. Did you want to come in?
Sorry. This is a topic which I feel quite strongly about in terms of mobility solution. Sorry, being a car guy, and I like the smell of petrol and burning rubber, but I also like to have I also like to have higher technology vehicles, etc. And I also like to have cars taken off the road, because then I can enjoy the driving a lot better. But all seriousness, I think I agree with Tan Sri in terms of the comment that at this point in time, the population of EVs are not enough to really substantially address the energy transition. And we just like to offer some thoughts around this, which may be something for us to, all of us, think about, right? I mean, there are certain things that we've seen why EV take-up is not as what we expect it to be, for example, yeah? Now, typically, the first thing is actually around the high purchase of the vehicles, right? The electric vehicles, compared to the internal combustion engine vehicles, certainly is a lot more expensive today. There's not enough scale for that to happen at this point in time. Secondly, in terms of the problem of the infrastructure, charging infrastructure, I mean, there's not a lot of charging infrastructure, whereas for petrol, you have every petrol station almost, every few hundred meters, right? Whereas, and the other thing is that in terms of the charging time, technology for charging electric vehicles are not at a level where you actually can go into a forecourt, put petrol for 5 minutes and you're off full tank and all that. It doesn't happen with the batteries. And I think the other aspects are perhaps around standards of the technology, the charging stations and all that kind of thing. So these are some of those challenges that actually prevents or actually becomes a bit of an obstacle for electric vehicle take-up to happen. And we are thinking that this requires a concerted effort, not just within one ministry, because it will involve transportation, it will involve many other agencies, etc. So the question about really transitioning energy requires quite a cross-functional, cross-economic kind of consideration in terms of what other policies are needed in order to actually facilitate this process. Now, I would like to also zoom in a little bit on electric vehicles, because we tend to think of electric vehicles as maybe just the private vehicles, but also there's a commercial vehicles aspect to it, right? And we believe that perhaps the first kind of area of focus could be commercial vehicles, the public transportation, the buses, the transport vehicles that's actually going up and down. The reason being here is that when we talk about the cost of electric vehicles, rather than looking at it from an upfront cost, the first capital cost, you need to look at it from a total cost of ownership. Yeah? Because electric vehicles start to make sense when you talk about the operating costs of it, as compared to, let's say, the conventional vehicles. Yeah? Because the cost of running it, the energy cost of using to run those vehicles are a lot lower. The cost of maintenance, of course, because of less moving parts, etc., a lot lower. So when you start to look at the cost, total cost of ownership, you start to have to take into account how frequently these vehicles are being utilized. The higher the utilization levels of these vehicles, the more it starts to make sense for electric vehicles to actually replace the conventional. So this puts right into the area of commercial vehicles, because commercial vehicles, buses, trucks, or whatever it is, logistics companies are constantly running. The vehicles are constantly running, and therefore the economics will start to make sense for them. And typically, if you're looking at the transportation within particular cities, for example, if you talk about public transport, then if you can marry that with, let's say, infrastructure build within cities, rather than trying to build infrastructure for everybody, build infrastructure for these kind of public transports, it starts to make sense, yeah? Because then you address the cost in terms of total cost of ownership, you address the issues about the charging stations and access and so on and so forth. Yeah? So I think that is, but it requires a bit more of a concerted effort to look at all of this together in order to actually make that a bit of a reality.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I wanted to come back to you, Minister, in terms of your large portfolio as we are. And innovation and technology are enabler, right? So if you want to certainly position the country at the forefront, as you were giving us the vision earlier, right, to the future, etc., innovation, enabling investment. And so what is your perspective there? What are the measures you want to put in place or you're putting in place to enable innovation to flourish? And then there is a regulatory element.
Let me just trim a little bit on the electric vehicles. Actually, as Tan Sri has said, right, we cannot move before the curve, beyond the curve, before the curve. So now, right now, what we are actually looking at is really, I think Dr. Fazrul also said a lot about the thing that we face in electric vehicles, but I just want to point that, because there are a lot of policymakers here, I just want, as a minister, to speak to you a little bit on this. As we think about electric vehicles, we should not be thinking about electric vehicle as an economy. For example, how to make more people drive electric vehicles and then put on more charging stations. What we should be talking about is that as we manufacture electric vehicles, as the world going into production in big-scale electric vehicle, what across the value chain that we have a competitive advantage to build our economy on. Of course, this is not under my portfolios, but I really want to encourage, because I understand there's MEAs that's around here, that you really need to think hard, not to create an economy of it, but an industry of it. An industry that can create jobs for it. As a matter of fact, I think the government's, one of the most important things as a government should do is to create jobs, and making sure that the pockets of the people have more money. And that, I think, is our ultimate goal as we go along with other things. So this is just to encourage all of you to actually think through that what are the competitive advantages and what sort of advantage can we think about in Malaysia at this location across the value chain of manufacturing electric vehicles. So in terms of innovation, I just want to only scope to innovation in terms of in energy landscape, especially in electricity. So what the government is interested is creating an ecosystem. Creating an ecosystem for decarbonization, decentralization, and democratization. This is a 3D for electricity. Why? For a simple reason that as you decentralize and you democratize, that means more people can compete in that pie. More people can compete in the same industry with a barrier of entries that is lower. People can go in, people with innovation and idea can go in and say, I want to play in this. And that this will make the industry itself more competitive. The government's role is not to push for certain, for example. To me, I do not believe that the government role is to push in a certain technology for certain things, but it's really creating an ecosystem for the survival for the fittest, of which that we constantly look out for technologies and open for disruptive technologies as we draw our regulation. I think that is the role of a government. As we draw regulation and regulatory framework, we must always believe that there is some disruptive technologies out there, there will be innovation that is beyond what you imagine today. So make ourselves, the policy framework, less rigid. That will be best for innovation. But I do not have time to go into the science and tech. But I just want to say that as policymakers, we must always think that the future is powered up by innovation today and competition. Our industry today must be able to compete globally, and they must be able to innovate. And through a regulatory framework that is more open for such competition, will be able to help and nurture our industry to compete at the global level.
This is a very good point in terms of you're not picking winner on technology, but you're enabling winner to emerge through an environment that, so you don't pick a technology or other. I just want to come back to this element of the pace and how you are at the right pace, your point on 3 earlier, and also on this electric vehicle, if we were electrifying all the vehicle today, imaginary things, it's not really a good thing because, big part of your energy mix is coal. So you'd actually not necessarily do better, right? So the pacing of all of these elements, and goes back to your earlier point, Minister, that is, this has to be worked together across different ministry even, and different part of the economy. Now, I have a lot of questions that keep coming and going in my thing. So what I wanted to do is, I think I have a 30 question, and I will ask the lady that is a technician here to help me in finding them again, because I regularly lose them. And but I will ask in a minute. I see, in the audience we have also representative from international companies. So I would like to ask a question, and so if we can prepare a mic from the gentleman there from Danfoss that can bring us a perspective on what you see from abroad. But before going there, one of the questions that I just lost from the iPad, but is coming back, was about your view, the Minister and Tanzri, on carbon pricing. So maybe you can tackle this simple question, just give us the answer on what's your view and what you think is, I don't know who's asked the question, but there's somebody there, maybe from your company or from ministry, but what is your view on carbon pricing? Who knows go first? Yeah, Minister first.
At this moment, the ministry has no plan, no near-term plan on carbon pricing. I think but I do not know other ministries whether they will advocate for this. But at this moment, I think energy, there are still so much of a gap that we can actually put on in terms of our efficiency. There's still so much of a carrot that we can give. It is not because of political populism, but it's really because of on the practical level that we are a developing country. We are even when we go to Paris, we go to UNFCCC, we actually negotiate as a developing country, and we are advocating for common but differentiated responsibilities. And that's to mean that whatever the developed country is doing, it is good for you to do, but you have a different context. There is a different context as we see how do we decarbonize. What is the eventual goal of a carbon pricing? Is that you want to decarbonize the economy. But there are hundreds of ways to decarbonize the economy. For example, energy efficiency. Energy efficiency can save you money as well as decarbonize. That is the best. That is the most lowest hanging fruits to go before you go about more difficult part. Just now, Dato' Fazrul has given that energy usage for building is 14%. But if you look into electricity, then electricity usage, more than 50% of electricity usage is in buildings. So let's say if we actually focus on these lowest hanging fruits and really decarbonize through that, and then it will be much easier. Don't go straight to carbon pricing without actually looking into what you can do at this moment. So my thought is simple. Don't make life difficult for the industry. Of course, I have a lot of environmental regulations coming for those industrial players, but that is of a different. So don't make life unreasonably difficult for the industry. Don't make lives unreasonably difficult for the people for the sake of an ideal. You must, when an ideal must be that what exactly you want to do. So that is what I want to bring forward today on this.
Fantastic. So it's good start. Don't make life difficult for the business. So what's your perspective on carbon pricing?
He wants to make himself that life difficult for himself.
No. First of all, I fully support the minister. No, I think, it varies from location, from country to country, from location to location. There are some geographies that we invest in, and we have got to take into account carbon tax. So I think what is important for industry is certainty. If we know that this is coming, so we plan for it. So I think that would be our view. In fact, in Malaysia, I don't know, it's the policymakers that decide one way or the other, but I think getting everyone engaged, and if we have to do this, there is a lead time. There is a lead time where we can all plan or new projects, we take into account the economics and all that. You know, I think there are some countries where I think the carbon tax is being put to good use. Yeah, I know of countries that, you know, it's a pool, but it's a ring-fence pool for environmental use. So I think that's been put into good use. But you know, but once again, I fully support and appreciate the ministers not to make life for the industries difficult.
Very good. So can we pass the mic to the gentleman here to briefly tell you your perspective as an outsider in, as me, on where you see the energy demand and efficiency play in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. So my name is Soren from the company Danfoss. I think first of all it has been a very interesting dialogue with a lot of different perspectives, and I'm actually very much supportive of the word energy efficiency. I will say that the most cost-efficient way to decarbonize our energy is clearly to work on our energy efficiency. And technologies today are available. There's basically absolutely no excuse for not moving it forward. When it comes to buildings, a lot of numbers has been mentioned. Basically our belief based on McKinsey, I think it's 40% of all energy, 40, in cities are in buildings. There were some numbers mentioned for the transport sector as well, and there are a lot of things we can do there. We need to have policies and we need to have partnerships between public and private sector in order to generate also the retrofits in the existing installations. So that terms for buildings as an example. I'm not sure about the building here. It could be one of those with potentially a green mark. We would probably still be able to reduce the energy consumption here by 25 to 30%. And there's one thing where we all need to make sure that we are not satisfied. That is that standards today is not the standards in 5 years from now. So we constantly need to push the barrier. Carbon tax was just discussed here. That can be one of the elements that can drive this. But there are two things which are important seen from a global company point of view. Predictability, which was mentioned by Mr. Tan, I believe, from Petronas as well. So we need to be able to plan long term. And the second thing is that it has to be across all sectors and it has to be across all industries, so we are not creating a leakage, a carbon leakage where we are creating unequal competitive situations. So predictability and competitive has to be taken into that consideration.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think this element of the efficiency, you know, the global belief when you look at the trend and the scenario, etc., is about energy demand will go up in the years, right? And there is also this concept of maybe energy demand will create more jobs, and it does create jobs, but also efficiency creates jobs. So if we were to flatten the energy demand growth, doesn't mean we wouldn't create jobs, because there will be job created in the efficiency space, to your point of creating industry around that. So I guess this question of renewable, but also efficiency are really, very, very important. Now, I'll follow up with some of these questions. We have 10 more minutes, and then what I will ask each of you to do a final comment, one minute, ideally with a commitment or with whatever last message you want to give to the audience. So one of the elements here is on the human capital, right? So we said there must be an evolution, and we have to start now. The question that is asked here is, there is competition from other sectors. And how you get the best talent to be in the energy system as opposite to, maybe the more technological, digital, and actually the more technological is the wrong definition in my view, because you are very technological when I think at any energy industry. But how you compete with the IT world, how you compete with for talents? You want to, maybe the business first?
I think the TNB and the Petronas will
the business first.
Can I have?
Yeah.
I think a few things that we cannot ignore. First, in terms of mobility of talents. Yeah, I think this is a phenomenon from all industry. The demographics that's coming in, the skill sets that's coming in, And many organizations, and even Petronas, one of them, how do we determine the workforce of the future? Very difficult. Do we need geologists that can also do coding? Do we need, do we need lawyers? I'm sorry. But you know, but this is a, I hope there are no lawyers. Well, my head of legal is there. But honestly, these are real issues. These are real issues. So I think it's for as an industry, and even as companies, we need to really differentiate ourselves. And it's very difficult to orchestrate industry-wide, but I think it's more on organization specific. In Petronas, for your information, for the last 4 years, I think we have tweaked, we have put initiatives, more than 20 initiatives, just to attract and retain talents. We have given them compressed work week. That means if you work enough hours in the day, you can get Friday afternoon off. We have given them casual dress down day. We have given them flexible hours. So, but these are always evolving. So I think in terms of, but one thing I like to say, I think we have got a very young demographics. Our average age is 35 years, 36 years in Petronas. Of course, I'm above the average. But you know, one thing we find, to have a sense of purpose for the organization is so key these days. While during my time, maybe salary and benefits would be a key consideration. But today, you talk to a young talent, the purpose of the organization is so key. I mean, for Petronas, our statement of purpose is, let me get this right, because it would be very embarrassing if I get it wrong. Our statement of purpose is a progressive energy and solutions partner, enriching lives for a sustainable future. So, you know, you'll be surprised how important this statement of purpose for the company. I don't know whether the industry can collectively do that, I'm not sure, but I think as company specific, we've got to do many new things to attract and retain talents.
Yeah, I think in terms of the transition, definitely for us, this is one of the biggest challenges, one of the challenges that we are looking at. But certainly it's not just a challenge, but it's a big opportunity. So we talk about different skill sets required, right? As you move towards a new energy, situation. So definitely there's certain skill sets will need to come in. And we see that the transition into electrification is one of those catalysts for new skill sets. Today, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of, let's say, for example, the industry, quite a low level of electrification compared to, let's say, in developed countries. Some reasons for that is actually there's a lot more automation in certain parts of the world where it's developed, which means that the processes are a lot more automated, which requires different kind of skill sets. So these are some of the things that gives the opportunity for higher level skilled labor, higher level technology, and higher level processes and value add to the economy. And to me, I think this is a question which collectively all of us will have to think how do we best ensure that that happens, because if there are policies that kind of contradict each other, and looking at maybe maintaining current traditional processes and all that, you may actually be sending students to universities and getting higher level of qualification, but as they leave the tertiary education, they might not have the right kind of jobs to actually meet their skill sets. But you have lots of jobs actually low skill sets. So we need to actually make sure that whole process is actually transitioned properly. I think that's currently, I think, one of the challenges that as a country we are looking at, I think we are facing. There's a lot of, in terms of low skilled labor requirement, but actually in terms of high skilled labor, that's actually fairly limited.
Please, Commissioner.
Comment from the regulatory perspective. Yeah. I think we also face this challenge of trying to obtain talents that are suitable to deliver the objectives of the transformation program in the transition period. But sometimes we also have to compete with people like Petronas, for instance. We have to compete with them because over the years they have pinched our good people.
There's a message there.
Yes, I'm keeping this, no more secret with you all, because we have various opportunities for our people to transact with Petronas management, and through meetings and through forums like this. And when Petronas sees there are good people, they simply take in to Petronas. so I don't know.
So you have to give a vision as well.
Yeah,
as
I don't know whether they are in this room or not, but that's real challenge for us, no? Yeah. Because we cannot compete with Petronas. We don't have the resources. It's not a level playing field at all. So I think I hope Petronas will take note of my comment. On the same note, I don't want to prevent our people for a better future in terms of job opportunities and better salaries. But anyway, this is a real challenge for us as a regulator to have a proper skill set and also to enable the capability and capacity to deliver the expectation of our stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the intervention. I'm sure you'll follow up offline. But Minister, there is a question for you on the ASEAN, and is about: do you foresee collaboration among the ASEAN countries via government or national companies to shift with this urgency of the energy transition? So, working with the ASEAN country at government level or at company level for accelerating the transition, if you like.
Sure. But before this, can I chip in a little bit on talents?
Go for it.
I think one of the things that the government would like the best talents as well, as of Petronas and TNB. We want the best talents simply because we have regulators. Regulators must be the best of the best, so that they can regulate you. Yeah. Otherwise, you will come back with so fancy presentation and all that. And so I think our Energy Commission is beyond that already. So don't need to come back with all your consultant presentation, beautiful reports without substance. But it takes time. So I think one thing that the government can offer, of which we are trying to work within our ministry, is really how do we put a sense of purpose more than just what the company can give you. I think working for the government, your sense of purpose is so much more bigger, and because it's for the bigger good of the community and for the country, of which we want to take this as the place where you attract good talents. So some of you from Petronas, you're welcome to the ministry as well. So you see, we want to attract good talents. We want to say that, you can earn big bucks outside, but you can make real change when you are in the government. So Tan Sri, you are welcome also. So once you have enough in your bank, things are different. As in, the purpose of being the self-fulfillment, the sense of purpose of being a government, being in the government, set the regulations, set the ecosystem is very different. So let me go back to the question on, what was the question about?
ASEAN.
The
ASEAN.
Yeah. So on the ASEAN levels, we always have an energy ministerial meeting where we will discuss of different types of collaborations, our aim together, how do we work together and in a more coordinated approach. One of the things that we're actually looking at is really ASEAN Grid. As a matter of fact, yesterday we just got an update from our officer that we're actually connecting from Laos, Thailand, and Malaysia, and actually we are also in the process. It's not finished on the undersea cable to Singapore, and that we were connected all through the grid. Because as we move to sustainability, that means energy security is also important. To connect all of us together, then it will make us more secure as a system. So we have some developments, and I hope to sign the MOU with the ministers in September on the grid and a firm supply, so that we can actually really have a grid that really that's functional, that, you know, when there is a need, that is actually we can transfer the electricity. So this is the main initiatives, and it's also started by and initiated by our officers in Malaysia, and that we hope to also looking into other ASEAN countries as well, as we see the needs, but above all, as we as a country, as a region, we are always working on security, reliability, and sustainability. This will be the aim and the balance that we need to take among all ASEAN energy ministers.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So we have 5 minutes left. So what I would suggest, would like to go back to each of you. Maybe we start from that side and this side to give you 1 minute, either a final message, something that you really think should be noted and taken care, or even a commitment. You know, what you are going to do to enable this energy transition.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and also thank you for Petronas organizing, and thanks to you for having us here, because I think this is a very important discussion, we believe. The question of energy is actually one of the biggest challenges or questions that in our age, I think, especially when you start to see the trends of energy consumption and so on. And at the core of it is this energy trilemma of balancing sustainability, the security, and also the affordability or economic development. Oftentimes, these are a difficult balance to maintain. And we believe that having this kind of conversations, not just in this room, but also outside of this room, and with the public, with our consumers, with policymakers, etc., it becomes a very, very important question, because you may want to have, let's say, for example, certain things on security, but it comes at a cost of, let's say, affordability, for example. Or you may want to have, let's say, long-term sustainability, but again, it comes as a cost, because if you look at, let's say, the LCOE, or the levelized cost of electricity today, for example, coal is actually still cheaper compared to gas or solar, for example. So there is that trade-off, and I think it is important that as a country, as a society, we increase our level of energy literacy and understanding of these issues, so that I think at the end of the day that these views can actually converge into policy that actually is workable for the country. And I think this is something which not only just Malaysia, I think also together with in the region has to be done.
Thank you very much. I think you're raising one point that we didn't have time to take, but it's this element of energy literacy across society. And I think this is an element where we saw earlier in our presentation that is human capital is not only for the company or the regulators and the ministry, but is also really the engagement of the consumer in this debate, if you like. Commissioner?
Yeah. Just to add to the talent issue just now. Actually,
that's your message. That's clear. This is your message.
Very, very short, because the story has not ended. Actually, what also happened is that there are also Petronas people who join ST. So along the way, that shows that money is not everything. Yeah. So you need other incentives as well. You know. So anyway, I wish to thank Petronas and TNB at this point of time for really supporting us in going forward to deliver all the objectives of the transition that is being done now, and I hope this will be continued in the future to achieve YB Minister's target of 20% renewable energy capacity in 2025. I think this is this is an audacious target. I think everybody is gung-ho about this target, YB. Thank you very much for giving us this target. I think we are really working hard, and I think it is a realistic target, and we can achieve the target going forward with the support from Petronas and TNB, and of course the other players, the other agencies like SEDA, My Power, of course, MESTEC, MEA, and of course, Vice Minister being a very dynamic minister with all the ideas and initiatives. So I wish to take the opportunity to thank everybody. I think we have to continue working closely together to deliver the target. Thank you.
Minister, you want to go?
Yeah, I think energy is the enabler of economic development and prosperity for this nation. I just want to say that we are all here as private sectors, all government stakeholders here. We are all here talking about the future. We are not only really talking about the future of energy, we're actually talking about the future of economic development and prosperity of this nation. And all of us here, whether it's in private or public, we are the top decision makers. We have a mission and responsibility beyond our 8 to 5 jobs. It is beyond that. It is really setting a foundations where it will enable the future generations for more economic development and prosperity. That is our mission. That is what we want to do so that our future generation will be able to get energy at a price that is affordable and for a long time. That because of this enable them for a better life. That is why we are here, not only about me being a minister or Tan Sri being a chairman or all that, but we are really here to set a foundation for our future generation. So I leave it
Thank you
to
very much. Thank you very much.
I wanted to speak about talents, but no. First, I think I made an error in terms of the currency on the investment that I said we made is 550 something billion ringgit. Because I look around and I see some media around, so I better be sure. So it's 500 something billion ringgit since day one on ENP. So on this, I think a few things that comes to mind, but essentially there'll be trade-offs. So for us to do this together, there will be trade-offs, and to me, I think that's why multi-party engagement, different stakeholders engagement is important, so that everybody understands what are the trade-offs each one will make. And concepts are easy. We can talk on concepts and all that, but the execution and attention to details, I think this is where we need the participation of everybody in the value chain. So I think that's all.
Thank you very much. So with this, we are coming to an end, and I think I don't know if you are asking for the applause or I will ask for the applause, but certainly it's been a pleasure to have this conversation, and certainly not the last one, but please.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for stellar panelists today. We have Yang Berhormat Puan Yobi Yin, Tan Sri Wan Zulkifli, Dato' Engineer Ahmad Fauzi, Dato' Fazlur, and our moderator, Mr. Roberto Boca. May I please invite you, our panelists, to the center of the stage for a photo op.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, may we request for you to please remain seated as we usher our guests out of this hall. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. and we hope that everyone found this forum to be enriching and insightful. We would now like to invite all of you to the luncheon, which is next door. Thank you again for joining us here today. Enjoy your lunch and have a pleasant day.